Anywhere on it. That test won't be moved to the 4th. And last we left off was section 1.4, so we're going to start in 1.5. Now this is titled Bias in Sampling. Bias in Sampling. And no matter how well you do it, no matter how hard you try, you do things randomly, making random phone calls. There appears to always be some bias in sampling. So we're talking about the major types of bias that can occur. And what I'm talking about is like someone does a poll 2 weeks before an election. You get the results, you're like, okay, and then 2 weeks later you realize, man, that poll was wrong then. You didn't get it right. Well, maybe something happened in those 2 weeks. Nah, I mean, it's just bias that can occur, and these can hit on some major types just to think about. The first type is voluntary response. Another type is under coverage of the population. All right. Under coverage of the population. Or non-response bias. And lastly, response bias. We'll talk about all these. All right. I'm sure a lot of you read through section 1.5, kind of talks about this stuff. You'll see these terms in there. Some of these seem like the same thing, so don't get so worried about that. Like if you're like, I don't know if that's non-response bias, but that's voluntary response, I'm being honest. Just that you're recognizing there's some bias. Feel free to list both of them if you're confused or not sure what to put. Voluntary response, what's a good example of that? It's like an internet poll. Well, let's say like a website like Drudge Report has a poll after there was a debate like on Fox News. There's one tonight, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think someone's not participating though. I don't think Trump's gonna. But you know, it's like right after the poll, they'll put it and go, who do you think won? And you go in there and you click on it, it's real quick, right? Gives the results. That one, last time I think the Drudge Report poll was over 1 million. I mean, over 1 million people responded, but still, it's what? It's voluntary, right? And only people who go to that website do it. And you had a point of question. Go ahead.
It's only people with strong opinions.
Yeah, there you go. So it's like someone has strong opinions. He's recognizing the bias there. It's like someone who's going to vote, right, in an election, maybe they're just, you know, not even aware of this and all this. They're not participating in this, so there's some bias there. It's a very good point. He's saying, oh, those people have a strong opinion about this, so it's voluntary. So that's a good example of that. Under coverage of the population. I mean, I'm thinking about, you can think of someone like a homeless person, right? You know, if someone's making phone calls, do you think the homeless person's going to get the phone call? No, you know? Or maybe someone's, you know, away in the military, someone's away at college, and they're trying to get in touch with them, and they're not there. And so sometimes they're just missing parts of the population. Non-response bias, I put a star on that. I'm famous for that. And when you have caller ID, when you get on your cell phone, if you don't recognize that phone number, do you answer? No. Same here. I don't. I'm not picking up. So maybe someone's trying to poll me, just ask me, you know, hey, 5 minutes of your time, I want to ask you who you're going to vote for, etc. If someone's trying to poll me in some kind of sampling process, I'm not responding. I'm not responding to it, right? Non-response bias. But both of these sometimes go together, because you might go, but I'm not responding, so it was voluntary. And so I didn't want you to get so worried about that. But what's a great example? At the end of a course, can you do those student opinion forms? Is it mandatory? No. No, so it's voluntary, and so it's like up to you. Usually, you know, we just brought in the sheets at the end of class. I said, I'm going to leave, and you do it. Students are very kind, would do it. But now it's internet. Now it's off the internet, and we're like, you know, hey, it's voluntary. You get these emails. And you can imagine the response rates actually went down. Because it's just like, voluntary. And they like to think or not. But I'm sure, going back to your point, what if they have a strong opinion about that instructor? You know, the instructor never showed up for 2 weeks or something like that. They might get in there and say something. Hey, response bias, good example of that. Sometimes the wording in the question may mislead someone or influence a person to make a decision on the way the question was worded. Okay? So it could be the wording in the question. You know, like, what's a good example? I don't know. Someone's polling about, like, children's sports. And they start out and they go, in the past year in the United States, 5 children have been injured or have died from playing football. So what are your thoughts about allowing football to be played at, you know, age 13, 18? You know, something like that. They give some shocking statistic in the question, the wording. That may indicate or mislead someone. So, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to say no, right? So the wording can sometimes influence a reaction. All right. Now I'm going to give an example. Something actually happened. And I'd like you to raise your hand and recognize any type of bias in this type of sampling method. And when I'm going back to, this is back in 1936. It was prior to the election, as they're voting for the United States, you know, president. And these 2 people are running. There's a gentleman named Alfred Landon, and he's running against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So they're running in Literary Digest. Like, I've never heard of that. There's probably a reason behind it as we go through this. But you hear the whole story. Literary Digest decides they're going to poll everyone. Maybe they're going to put themselves on the map because they're going to be the ones who kind of basically predict who's going to win this election. So they're going to do this huge thing where they're going to send out 10 million mailers. And they do that. They send out 10 million mailers to people to have them send it back indicating who they're going to vote for in the election. I mean, that's a lot of mail, isn't it? Especially in 1936. This is Literary Digest, true story. They actually got 2.4 million responses.
From 10,000 mail?
Yeah. So it's 10 million sent out. They got back 2.4 million responses. Which you might go, wow, that's a lot. I know. But a lot of people didn't respond, do you agree? But they sent out 10 million mailers. 2.4 million responded. How did they get the names of these addresses? Or how did they get these addresses and stuff? They used phone books back in 1936. This is what they used. If someone belonged to some professional organization, like a club, maybe like a golf club, or they subscribed to a magazine in 1936, they got their address that way. So this is how they got all the names and the addresses, and they sent them to them. Well, they predicted that Alfred Landon was going to blow away FDR, like landslide. Now, does anybody remember our President Alf Landon? No, they totally got it wrong. Do you agree? FDR won, but they had this predicted as the winner. A lot of money spent on this, true? That's why now we're like, what happened to him? Yeah, it kind of knocked them out, didn't it? It didn't go so well for them. So what's going wrong? They thought they had it right. Well, there was major bias in there. So does anybody want to indicate some biases that occurred? That's what happened. It was bias in their sampling method. Anybody notice one that occurred in this? You got one. What do you think?
Non-response.
I love it. Yeah, non-response. And you want to go with voluntary response too, everyone? Saying the same thing? I love it. Because non-response. He's saying non-response. They sent out what? 10 million flyers. Only what? 2.4 million responded. It's a lot of responses. A lot of people didn't respond. Do you agree? A lot of people got it and go, not mailing it back. Does anybody indicate another one? I think it's the one that really influenced their, results there.
That's what I was going to under coverage.
Love it. So these were great, just as under coverage of the population. So it's 1936, coming out of the Great Depression. Does everyone have a phone, a telephone in 1936? Remember how they got all the numbers? They got them from the telephone book. Did everyone have a telephone? You want to hit the entire population. What's representing the population? I want to have a telephone. So, they definitely missed people with this. Does that make sense? And here come out the voters for the real election. FDR wins. That's very good. I guess I can't say this. I wasn't sure of the wording. I don't know how they asked it. Unless you might say, well, who they list first? Sometimes the person listed first might get more votes if people don't know either one or just want to send it back. So, but great. Hey, for your test, I'll give a true story. I'll give something that really happened. I asked that you list just at least one bias. Could you do that for me on the test? List at least one. If you notice more than one, you can. That's what I mean. You're like, oh, this and this. But out of these, list at least one bias.